never had the opportunity to meet him as you did. We remember, that scene where you said, "I brought you into this world, I can take you out."
When a television character can make all of America laugh, then pause in thought and quietly grow with each episode, that's no longer just a role. That's a collective memory. And Malcolm Jamal Warner as Theo Huxtable in The Cosby Show was exactly that memory. But on July 20th, 2025, that memory was cut short, suddenly cruelly, when Warner was confirmed to have drowned in Costa Rica at the age of 54. Amid the outpouring of grief from fans around the world, one person remained silent: Bill Cosby. For years he withdrew from the media and refused to speak of the past. So what made him, at the age of 88, finally break that silence? The answer lies in fragments of memory soon to be revealed. Let's uncover them together. And if you value stories like this, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications now. A shocking death. When the first news headline about a drowning in Costa Rica appeared on ABC7's website, few imagined that just hours later the confirmed name would be Malcolm Jamal Warner, once a symbol for an entire generation of American TV viewers. The news spread like wildfire, quickly dominating headlines across major global media outlets. Those who had grown up in the 1980s and 1990s, who had watched The Cosby Show episode after episode, fell silent, not because they didn't believe the death was real, but because they couldn't believe it had happened to Malcolm at 54 during what seemed to be a peaceful, almost mundane family vacation. On July 20, 2025, in the afternoon at Cocos Beach, a popular tourist spot in Limon Province, Costa Rica, Malcolm was swept away by a rip current, a powerful and sudden ocean flow feared even by the strongest swimmers. Costa Rica's national police quickly confirmed the victim was American actor Malcolm Jamal Warner. The cause of death was ruled asphyxiation after being pulled too far out to return to shore. By the time rescue teams found him, Warner showed no signs of life. First responders at the scene could only pronounce him dead. No stimulants were found, no physical injuries. It was in every sense a tragic accident. What made the news even more heartbreaking was the setting. Malcolm was on vacation with his family, including his wife and daughter. Eyewitnesses described the scene before the incident as entirely peaceful. A sunny day, calm waves, children playing, and adults sunbathing. Then everything changed in an instant. One witness recalled seeing Malcolm struggling to swim back to shore, but after several seconds, he disappeared beneath the waves. No one had time to react. No one could have imagined that America's big brother, as many fans called him, would leave in such a silent, haunting way. As soon as his identity was confirmed, major media outlets including ABC News, The Mirror, TMZ, and CNN broke the story. Names long tucked away in viewers' memories: Theo Huxtable. The Cosby Show, The Huxtable Family, instantly became top search terms within 24 hours. Tribute articles, tweets, and videos spread rapidly. A generation of African Americans raised on television began to speak out. They weren't talking about a celebrity. They were talking about a brother, a role model, a piece of their childhood. On social media, a wave of artists and fans offered condolences. Actress Tabitha Brown wrote Malcolm wasn't just Theo on TV. He was the big brother I never had. The Cosby family was all of our family. But Theo was the heartbeat. Rest easy. Niecy Nash emotionally recounted their last conversation. "We just spoke the other day. He gave me flowers for my work in the industry and said how happy we both were in our marriages." And now, a fan account named Essence Simone posted on ex-Twitter, Malcolm Jamal Warner was Black American royalty. This loss really hurts. Another user ag wrote Theo was literally the childhood of a black boy. What a loss, man. And Lonnie Love, in a short but weighty post, concluded, he wasn't just talented, he was kind. He made people feel loved and seen. Within 48 hours, scenes from The Cosby Show were being shared across platforms. The expressive family lip-sync performance, the iconic Gordon Gartrell shirt moment, and episodes about Theo's struggles with school and how his parents helped him through dyslexia. Every line, every awkward but honest expression from Theo, the imperfect but relatable teenager, suddenly became a reel of cherished memories for millions of viewers. What's remarkable is this: Malcolm never abandoned Theo, even as he grew into more mature and complex roles. Over a career spanning more than 4 decades, he starred in Malcolm and Eddie, 1996-2000 read, Between the Lines with Tracy Ellis Ross, 2011, and most recently as Dr. A.J. Austin in Fox's medical drama The Resident, which ran for 5 seasons. In 2015, he won a Grammy for Best Traditional R&B Performance with Robert Glasper and Lala Hathaway for their rendition of Stevie Wonder's Jesus Children of America. In 2023, he received another Grammy nomination for his spoken word album Hiding in Plain View. Beyond television, he was a multi-talented artist, writer, poet, and advocate for Black artistry. Still, his passing was reduced to a headline: Malcolm Jamal Warner drowns on vacation. And perhaps that's what truly jolted Hollywood, because what he left behind, both on screen and in life, cannot be summed up in a sudden ending. Here's something not everyone knows: when The Cosby Show debuted in 1984, Malcolm was only 14 years old. By the time it ended after its 8th season in 1992, he was nearly 22, growing up on national television under the gaze of millions. He didn't rebel, he didn't fall, he didn't lose himself. On the contrary, he used the light from that role to guide his real-life responsibilities as a committed artist, a devoted husband, a protective father, and a quiet role model for the community. When the death came, it didn't just bring sorrow, it brought realization that among hundreds of TV stars who had faded from memory, there was one who quietly endured. Like a familiar presence no one noticed until it was gone. And that person was Malcolm Jamal Warner. When Bill Cosby spoke out. 3 days after news of Malcolm Jamal Warner's death was confirmed, a special phone call was made from the office of attorney Andrew Wyatt. There was no grand press release, no formal press conference, no live stream, just a quiet statement from a man who was once at the center of America's attention and now lives in near seclusion at age 88, Bill Cosby. For years, since being released from prison in 2021 following a series of sexual assault allegations, Bill Cosby had stayed away from the media. The last images of him were from when he left prison, expressionless with cloudy eyes still flickering with familiar defiance. Since then, he disappeared from interviews, declined requests from the press, and even severed ties with many of his former castmates. And yet, faced with the sudden passing of Malcolm, the man who once called him TV Dad, Cosby broke his nearly 4-year silence. And in a statement given to TMZ, Andrew Wyatt recounted Cosby's reaction upon hearing the news. He was completely stunned. It was as if everything inside him had been drained. Wyatt explained that Cosby had been at home not watching the news, not checking his phone, and it took several urgent calls before he would even listen. When the news was officially confirmed, Cosby simply kept repeating one thing, again, again. Wyatt said Cosby didn't cry, but he walked into a room, closed the door for hours, and when he finally emerged, he said something that left the entire office in silence. It feels like losing a son all over again. That was no metaphor. In 1997, while filming an episode of The Cosby Show, Bill Cosby received a phone call informing him that his son, Ennis Cosby, had been shot and killed during a failed robbery on a Los Angeles freeway. Ennis, then 27, was a graduate student in special education, known for being quiet, scandal-free, and once referred to by Malcolm Jamal Warner as the ideal younger brother. Ennis's death devastated Cosby for months, and now, nearly 30 years later, that pain was awakened again, this time by someone not related by blood, but connected to him, like a real son. Cosby didn't speak much, but he allowed Wyatt to share short memories as a way to express his grief without facing the media directly. Wyatt revealed that the last time Cosby and Malcolm spoke was over the phone, just weeks before Warner traveled to Costa Rica. At the time, Malcolm was excited about an upcoming concert in Minneapolis, where he would perform alongside independent artists and present an original spoken word piece. He believed art could change the world, Cosby said, and I believed he was truly doing it. According to Wyatt, That phone call left Cosby smiling for the rest of the afternoon, something rare since his retreat from public life. Cosby also recalled a more recent memory, when Malcolm visited the Cosby family estate in Massachusetts. Though that part of the story will be told in more detail later, Wyatt shared that Cosby described it as the night my family laughed more than they had in 10 years. For Cosby, Malcolm's death wasn't just the loss of a former co-star. It was the end of a bond that had become a lifeline, especially during years marked by public scrutiny and imprisonment. More importantly, Wyatt revealed that Cosby had not planned to speak out at all. Even as the media coverage surged, Cosby remained silent. The Warner family didn't reach out to him, understandably so given the strained relationships among the Cosby Show cast in the wake of scandal. But on the morning of July 22nd, while watching a short clip from the episode where Theo lip-syncs with his father, a scene going viral with millions of views, Cosby nodded and said to Wyatt, "I'm ready now." Cosby's official statement to the press was brief. There were no flowery tributes, no defenses, no overt emotion. Just a few lines that served as a closing note to a father-son story. Malcolm was not just a co-star. To me, he was a son. Someone I could lean on every time I stepped on stage. Someone who made me believe Theo Huxtable truly existed. Because Malcolm lived that way both on-screen and off. But what surprised the public was not that Cosby mourned Malcolm. That was expected. It was that he chose to speak at all. In an era where every word from Cosby is dissected, scrutinized, even boycotted, his decision to make a statement, even through his representative, carried deeper meaning, an acknowledgement of personal grief beyond the social controversy surrounding him. Perhaps Cosby knew he wouldn't have many more chances to say goodbye. At 88, with declining health and a life now lived in near isolation, he has few names left to say aloud. And now, one of the last people he considered family, Malcolm Jamal Warner, is gone. In a rare moment, Cosby was no longer the man judged by public opinion, no longer the fallen icon of American television. He was simply an old father sitting in front of a screen watching an old episode, and seeing his television son smiling and walking away one last time. Father-son on and off screen. Amid the media storm and dense stream of headlines following Malcolm Jamal Warner's death, a few quiet fragments of real life surfaced from Bill Cosby's memory. Not from the stage, not from the studio set, but from soft golden afternoons on the Massachusetts countryside, a place he called the last place left to remember family. There, on the vast Cosby estate, Malcolm once visited as a familiar member of the household. No lights, no lines, no scripts. Just real laughter, the kind Cosby said my family hadn't heard in a very long time. The last time Malcolm visited the estate was a few autumns ago during a short trip to New England with his wife. Wyatt recalled Cosby preparing a family dinner, brewing the morning coffee himself, and playing old VHS tapes, recordings from the Cosby Show era that he still kept. When Malcolm walked in, Cosby's youngest granddaughter, who had never seen the original show, asked who the uncle on TV was. Everyone laughed. Malcolm laughed the loudest. That night, gathered around an old piano, Cosby picked up a clarinet and Malcolm held a guitar. A small improvised tune filled the early cold air. "There's no one else in this business I can play music with so comfortably," Cosby once said, except Ennis, and now Malcolm. In that moment, the two were no longer separate in his mind. The connection between Malcolm and Ennis Cosby is something few knew. They were only a few years apart in age and were once encouraged by Ennis's father, Bill, to make music together during early Cosby Show days. No cameras, no recording, just two teens playing drums and bass in the living room. Cosby remembered, "I didn't have to say anything. They understood each other in their own language." Perhaps that's why after Ennis's death, Cosby kept his distance from Malcolm for some time. Not out of coldness, but because every time he saw him, he saw his son. But it was Malcolm who slowly bridged the distance. He didn't push. He didn't question. He didn't appear too often. He simply sent gifts, holiday cards, or short voice recordings on Cosby's birthday. In a handwritten letter from 2012, which Wyatt once read, Malcolm wrote, I know you don't need to hear this, but I've always thought of you as the man who taught me how to be the man I wanted to become, even if I never said that clearly. Their bond wasn't expressed through grand declarations, but through routine. Through the fact that Malcolm always showed up at Cosby family events, even when other cast members distanced themselves after the scandal. Through the time he helped organize a quiet reunion between Cosby and former Cosby Show crew members, something Cosby himself said pulled me out of the depression I was drowning in through 2019. But their relationship wasn't only forged through quiet evenings or shared memories. It began on the set, where a 14-year-old newcomer stunned a television legend. The kid arrived earliest left, last Cosby once said. He didn't rehearse at home, he rehearsed in the holding tent. That wasn't a metaphor. It was a real place, a temporary shelter set up backstage where most actors relaxed. While other kids played games, Malcolm opened a notebook, memorized lines, practiced posture, and refined his delivery. No one told him to do that, Cosby said. He just knew what kind of life he had to live to act truthfully. That professionalism was rare at his age, and it made Cosby start treating Malcolm not like a child, but as a peer, a true scene partner. Their scenes together became more fluid, more improvisational, because Cosby knew this boy wasn't just memorizing, he was reading the emotional rhythm. Many times the director kept unscripted lines between them because they were too real to rewrite. From that point on, the boundary between reality and performance began to blur. They weren't acting as father and son, they lived that way. Cosby once admitted in a 1990 interview that there were moments he couldn't distinguish between Cliff and Bill, between Theo and Malcolm. And that's what made Malcolm's loss so painful later on, because Cosby didn't just lose someone who played his son. He lost part of his life, a role that never ended. Such the question, whether there's a clear line between playing a father and truly grieving as one, was perhaps answered in how Cosby responded to Malcolm's death. Not with ceremony, not with spectacle, just a quiet confession. It feels like losing a son again. In Cosby's heart, the memories of the stage and the memories of real life had long blended, to the point where there was no need to separate them. When the cameras shut off, they were still father and son, even without blood ties. Malcolm Jamal Warner once said in a 2023 interview that The Cosby Show wasn't just a sitcom, it was a hallway where generations were led toward adulthood. For Cosby, that hallway didn't just guide viewers, it guided him too. A man who once carried the burden of shaping the image of the black family on television found in Malcolm a son he had both created and learned from. Now that hallway is closed and only echoes remain. No more jam sessions. No more laughter drifting through the estate. Just a silence, deep enough to hold a father-son bond that began on stage and ended in real life. But if the personal memories between them were the emotional glue, then the character of Theo Huxtable was the thread that tied Malcolm to millions of viewers. A television character, but one whose impact reached far beyond the screen. It's time to revisit Theo's legacy, and why that TV son still lives in the hearts of audiences today. Theo Huxtable and the legacy of an icon. In the history of American television, few supporting characters have left as deep a mark as Theo Huxtable, the only son in the Huxtable family on The Cosby Show. When Malcolm Jamal Warner first appeared on screen in 1984 at just 14 years old, no one expected that this teenager with his short curly hair and a smile half shy, half mischievous would become a role model for an entire generation of young black Americans. And not merely an entertainment figure, Theo became a living metaphor for youth trying to find their place in a world full of prejudice, but also hope. Theo wasn't a perfect kid. In fact, in the early episodes, he often got his homework wrong, received low grades, and acted out in typical teenage ways, sleeping in, avoiding chores, speaking bluntly. But that's exactly what made him relatable. At a time when black families were rarely portrayed in full depth on television, the image of a black son who was both insecure and rebellious, yet consistently guided with love and dialogue by his parents, was a cultural breakthrough. One of the most frequently referenced episodes is Theo's Holiday Season 1, Episode 22, when Theo insists on living like an adult without going to college. Instead of lecturing him, his parents recreate the adult world inside their home, from mock job interviews to joblessness and rent bills. The episode ends with laughter, but leaves a profound message. Maturity doesn't come from freedom, but from responsibility. For many viewers, especially in the Black community, it was the first time they saw a family like theirs. Not tragic, not sensational, but filled with humanistic teaching. Joshua Desargue, with his natural acting instinct, Warner brought such authenticity to Theo that at times people believed it was his real personality. The episode about dyslexia, Theo's diagnosis, became a milestone. It was not only a journey of discovering a learning disability, but also a message about family patience, the courage to admit our shortcomings, and above all, the belief that intelligence isn't measured by grades. From awkward teenage love to being teased about his looks, from wearing the wrong designer shirt, the iconic Gordon Gartrell shirt scene, to getting outsmarted by friends in dating games, Theo always failed before learning how to grow. But that growth arc helped the character transcend the stereotype of the TV son and become a symbol for a generation learning to come of age in the real world. An article in Ebony once noted, if Cliff Huxtable was the model of the ideal father, then Theo was the most real son, the one who frustrated you and made you proud at the same time. Black viewers who were teens in the 80s and 90s often said they felt seen, for the first time, on screen. And not just seen, but encouraged to believe in themselves. Some have written that watching The Cosby Show inspired them to pursue college rather than drop out. Others said, Theo taught them that it's okay to make mistakes, as long as you can get back up. When The Cosby Show ended in 1992, many believed Warner would struggle to escape Theo's shadow. But he proved otherwise. Instead of rejecting the image associated with him, he chose to expand it, not through scandal or a rebellious persona, but through more mature and layered roles. Why? From 1996 to 2000, Warner starred in the sitcom Malcolm and Eddie alongside Eddie Griffin, a surprising blend of streetwise style and thoughtful wit. He later impressed as Dr. Alex Reed in Read Between the Lines 2011 opposite Tracy Ellis Ross, playing a modern father figure who echoed elements of Cliff Huxtable, but in a 21st century realistic version. Most notably in the past decade, Warner delivered a powerful performance as Dr. A.J. Austin in Fox's medical drama, The Resident. The role, which ran for 5 seasons, was praised for blending toughness with vulnerability, affirming that Warner was no longer a man of the past. He was shaping the present. Beyond television, Warner also showcased his versatility in music and spoken word poetry. In 2015, he won a Grammy for Best Traditional R&B Performance alongside Robert Glasper and Lala Hathaway for their rendition of Stevie Wonder's Jesus Children of America. In 2023, he was again nominated for a Grammy for his spoken word album Hiding in Plain View, a work that blended poetry jazz and personal storytelling with introspective depth. Warner didn't chase the market. He didn't need scandal to stand out, no need for flashy comebacks. He quietly worked, chose his projects carefully, and consistently upheld his artistic integrity. As a result, the image of a grown-up Theo, no longer clumsy but still innately kind, continued to live in the public's heart. Malcolm Jamal Warner's legacy isn't defined by the number of roles he played or the breadth of his media coverage. It's defined by the consistency between the artist and the man. From Theo, the once awkward teenage son, to A.J. Austin to Grammy-winning artist, every chapter was part of one journey, proving that a young black man isn't just allowed to dream, but can live, stumble, learn, and rise again with dignity. And that's why when Malcolm passed, what millions mourned wasn't just an actor. It was a part of their memory, a piece of their youth, and a rare kind of humanity that is still missing in much of modern television. In a world full of characters written to shock, to trend, to go viral, Theo Huxtable and Malcolm Jamal Warner remain proof that you can move people's hearts simply by being real. However, no memory remains untouched. The shadows cast by the years following The Cosby Show fell upon the series and those who built it. Amid diverging paths, people continue to ask, can we separate the art from the artist? And does a legacy retain its full value if the one who left it behind is no longer embraced? 2 diverging paths and a shared legacy. In 2015, when the sexual assault allegations against Bill Cosby began to dominate headlines, a deep fracture formed in America's collective memory. The nation's TV dad, the comedian, the trailblazer, who brought black family life into the mainstream, suddenly became a symbol of disgrace. From that moment, every episode of The Cosby Show grew heavier. Each rerun sparked debate, and every beloved character faced the question, can I still be loved if I once stood beside him? In the eye of that storm, Malcolm Jamal Warner didn't stay silent, but he also didn't speak in the way the media expected. He didn't defend Bill Cosby, nor did he denounce him. In an interview with Billboard, Warner said only one thing: sincere and measured, I wasn't there, but I know that Cosby was good to me. A mentor, a friend, someone who had a major impact on my life. Then he stopped. No justification, no condemnation, no moral soundbite for media satisfaction, just a deliberate silence as a way to honor both memory and reality. So that wasn't evasion. It was a courageous choice in an era where every word is dissected. While many turned their backs on the legacy of The Cosby Show, Warner, through his restraint and dignity, refused to let that memory be erased. He didn't try to preserve the show by excusing its creator. He preserved it through his own being a grown-up. Theo principled, still standing with his audience, never betraying the values that the show once stood for. And because of that, Theo Huxtable didn't die. The Cosby Show, though no longer aired publicly, still lives in the minds of viewers. Not because of Cosby, but because of Malcolm. He salvaged the good that remained of that legacy by living a life free of blemish. A life of calm talent, commitment, and ethics. And when he passed, people didn't only recall his character, they remembered what he represented: maturity without spectacle, success without scandal. Character, not just talent, is what makes an icon endure. Now, at 88, Bill Cosby may never speak again. His words for Malcolm may have been the last time he allowed himself to be just a man. Unguarded, unscripted, unapologetic. And perhaps he now understands some memories, once tainted, can never be fully restored. But the memory of Malcolm Jamal Warner is different. It is intact, resilient, and rising stronger than ever. In a world where collective memory is often warped by scandal and spectacle, Warner quietly proved that there are still people strong enough to protect what's worth remembering. And that, not awards or headlines, is the most enduring legacy he left behind for American popular culture. If the story of Malcolm Jamal Warner and the legacy he left behind moved, you don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss more stories about the people who helped shape an entire generation. We retell these memories, not just for nostalgia, but to understand why they continue to live within us. Let's keep the flame alive for the values that truly deserve to be remembered.
All data, analysis, and commentary in this video are presented based on information available at the time of production. The content is subject to change over time and should not be considered a definitive forecast. There is still so much more to explore: stories of resilience, legacy, and truth. Feel free to dive into some of our top recommended videos now appearing on your screen.